History is full of stories that end with a question mark, moments when entire communities, armies, or even civilizations simply stepped off the stage of time, leaving behind nothing but echoes and riddles. Picture a bustling city, alive with voices, trade, and culture, only to be found abandoned years later, its streets empty, its homes frozen in time. Or an army of thousands marching confidently into the unknown, never to be seen again. These aren't just plot twists from a mystery novel. They're real events that have puzzled historians, archaeologists, and storytellers for centuries. And today, we're diving deep into 32 of the most haunting disappearances from the ancient world, cases where the trail goes cold, the evidence vanishes, and the truth slips through our fingers like sand. What is it about these vanishings that grips our imagination so tightly? Maybe it's the sheer scale of them, the idea that something so significant could just disappear. Or perhaps it's the lingering sense of injustice, the feeling that these stories deserve answers, even if we may never find them. Think of the lost colony of Roanoke, where an entire settlement vanished, leaving behind only a cryptic carving on a tree. Or the legendary Ninth Legion of Rome, a force so formidable it seemed invincible, until it marched into the mists of Britain and was never heard from again. These aren't just footnotes in history books. They're gaping holes in our understanding of the past, silent reminders of how much we still don't know. But here's the thing, every disappearance leaves behind whispers. A fragment of pottery, a half-buried sword, a rumor passed down through generations. And as we piece together these clues, we're not just solving puzzles. We're stepping into the shoes of those who came before us, feeling their fears, their hopes, and their mysteries as if they were our own. So join us on this journey through time, where we'll explore vanished cities, missing armies, and unexplained silences. By the end, you might just find yourself looking at history's blank spaces in a whole new light, and wondering what other secrets are still waiting to be uncovered. One of the most chilling vanishings in history began with hope. A group of 115 English settlers arriving on Roanoke Island in 1587, eager to build the first permanent English colony in the New World. Among them were men, women, and even children, including Virginia Dare, the first English child born on American soil. But when a resupply ship returned 3 years later, the colony was deserted. No bodies, no battle scars, just eerie silence and a single clue carved into a wooden post. The word, the name of a nearby island and the native tribe that lived there. It was as if the entire community had vanished into thin air, leaving behind empty houses, undisturbed belongings, and a mystery that would endure for centuries. So what really happened to the lost colonists? Some believe they were wiped out by hostile tribes or Spanish raiders, though the lack of evidence makes this unlikely. Others suggest they starved or fell victim to disease, but why would their remains vanish without a trace? The most compelling theory points to integration, that the settlers, desperate for survival, joined the people, blending into their community. Recent archaeological digs on island, once home to the, have turned up European artifacts from the late 16th century, a signet ring, weapon fragments, and even slate writing tablets. These discoveries hint at peaceful interaction, perhaps even cooperation between the groups. Yet without definitive proof, the fate of Roanoke's settlers remains shrouded in uncertainty. Then there are the darker legends, whispers of supernatural forces, curses, or even alien abductions. These tales, though far-fetched, speak to the deeper unease this mystery stirs in us. How could an entire community disappear without leaving a single clear trail? Roanoke's story isn't just about missing people. It's about the fragility of human presence in history, how easily footsteps can fade from the sand. Every few years, new theories emerge, from secret voyages to hidden graves, but the truth stays just out of reach. And perhaps that's why this disappearance captivates us so much, not because we'll ever solve it, but because it forces us to confront how much of the past is built on silence. The Ninth Legion's disappearance reads like a scene from a tragedy. 5,000 of Rome's finest soldiers, hardened by decades of conquest, vanishing into the damp wilderness of northern Britain as if the earth itself swallowed them whole. This wasn't just any military unit. The Ninth was legendary, a force that had fought across Europe and even crushed rebellions in Britain itself. But around the year 108, something went terribly wrong. The last official mention of the Legion places them at the edge of the Roman frontier, tasked with subduing the unruly tribes of modern-day Scotland. Then, silence. No battle reports, no scattered survivors, not even a single rusted helmet left behind to tell the tale. One theory suggests annihilation. The Caledonian tribes, led by the fierce warrior, were notorious for their guerrilla tactics. Ancient historians like Tacitus describe the land itself as an enemy, dense forests, treacherous bogs, and relentless rain perfect for ambushes. Could the Ninth have been lured into a trap, cut down to the last man in some forgotten glen? Archaeologists have searched for decades, but not a single mass grave or battlefield has been found to confirm this. Then there's the desertion theory. Life on the frontier was brutal, cold, disease-ridden, and far from home. Perhaps the legionaries, disillusioned and exhausted, simply threw down their swords and melted into the local population. Some historians point to later Roman records mentioning Ninth Legion deserters in Gaul, but these references are vague, leaving room for doubt. The most tantalizing clue comes from a single line in a 2nd century document suggesting the Legion was reassigned to the Middle East. But here's the catch. No other records, inscriptions, or accounts from that region mention their arrival. It's as if the Ninth marched into history's fog, leaving behind only rumors. Even the fate of their iconic eagle standard, a sacred symbol of Roman honor, remains unknown. Did it fall into enemy hands, or was it buried in some unmarked grave? What makes this mystery endure isn't just the scale of the loss, but the way it mirrors Rome's own decline. The Ninth's disappearance coincides with the Empire's gradual retreat from Britain, as if their vanishing act was an omen. Modern storytellers can't resist the allure either. From Rosemary's novel The Eagle of the Ninth to Hollywood adaptations, the Legion's ghost lingers in our imagination. Yet for all the speculation, the truth remains as elusive as the mist that shrouds the Scottish Highlands. One thing's certain, when 5,000 armed men vanish without a trace, history doesn't just lose soldiers, it loses a piece of its own story. The desert has a way of swallowing secrets whole, and few vanishings prove that more chillingly than the 50,000 soldiers of Cambyses II, lost in the sands of Egypt over 2,500 years ago. Hear how the story unfolds. In 524 BC, the Persian king, fresh from conquering Egypt, sent his army westward to crush a rebellion at the Oracle of Ammon in the Oasis. But according to the Greek historian Herodotus, the soldiers never arrived. Halfway through their march, a monstrous sandstorm roared to life, burying every last man beneath a shifting sea of dunes. The earth itself, it seemed, had turned against them. For centuries, this tale was dismissed as legend, a cautionary fable about hubris and the wrath of the gods. But then came the whispers from the desert. In the late 1900s, archaeologists stumbled upon eerie clues in Egypt's western Sahara, fragments of ancient weaponry, tattered cloth, and even what appeared to be mass graves. Could these be remnants of Cambyses' doomed army? The artifacts date roughly to the right era, but here's the catch. They're scattered across miles, with no clear trail linking them. Some scholars argue these are simply remnants of desert travelers lost over centuries, not proof of a single catastrophic event. Others propose a darker twist. Perhaps Herodotus' sandstorm was a metaphor. Ancient texts hint that the army might have been ambushed by Libyan tribes or perished from thirst after losing their way in the trackless waste. The Sahara was, and still is, a merciless place. Even today, modern explorers vanish without a trace in its dunes. But the most haunting question isn't just how they disappeared, it's why the desert refuses to give them back. Unlike other ancient battlefields where bones and armor rise to the surface over time, this army left no concentrated trail. Sand moves, of course, but 50,000 men would left more than scattered arrowheads. Unless, of course, the storm didn't just bury them, it scattered them like dust, leaving no grave to find. The mystery taps into something primal, the fear of being erased. Here was an entire fighting force once the terror of empires reduced to a ghost story. Modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging has yet to crack the case. Maybe the desert's too vast, or maybe the army's fate wasn't dramatic at all. Perhaps they simply disbanded, their disappearance spun into myth by a historian with a flair for drama. Yet the legend persists, fed by occasional discoveries. In 2009, 2 Italian archaeologists claimed to find bronze weapons and human bones near, but the findings were inconclusive. And so the desert keeps its secret, leaving us to wonder if we're chasing shadows, or if somewhere beneath those endless sands, 50,000 silent soldiers still wait to be found. The Mary wasn't just an abandoned ship, it was a riddle wrapped in salt-stained wood. When the merchant vessel was spotted drifting near the Azores in December 1872, every detail deepened the unease. The sails were tattered but still set, as if the crew had simply stepped away mid-task. A single lifeboat was missing, yet there was no sign of struggle, no water damage, not even the faintest scratch to suggest violence. The ship's cargo, barrels of industrial alcohol, remained intact, and a half-eaten meal sat on the galley table, long since spoiled. It was as if the 10 people aboard had vanished mid-breath, leaving behind only their belongings and a mystery that would haunt maritime history forever. So what could have driven an experienced crew to abandon a perfectly seaworthy vessel? One theory points to the alcohol fumes. A buildup of flammable gas might have sparked fears of an imminent explosion, prompting a panicked evacuation. Yet if that were the case, why didn't they return once the danger passed? Others whisper of piracy, but pirates would take in the cargo, not left it untouched. Then there's the sea itself. Perhaps a waterspout or rogue wave terrified the crew into fleeing, only for the lifeboat to be lost in the vast Atlantic. But the most haunting clue is the ship's logbook. The final entry, dated 9 days before the Mary was found, noted nothing unusual, just routine coordinates and weather observations. No distress call, no frantic scribble, no hint of trouble. That blank space between the last log entry and the discovery is where the imagination runs wild. Some even speculate about supernatural forces or extraterrestrial encounters, though these theories say more about our fascination with the unexplained than they do about the facts. What makes the Mary endure isn't just the mystery, it's the eerie normalcy of the scene. This wasn't a wreck or a battle, it was a snapshot of a moment interrupted. Over the years, the ship itself became a kind of ghost, surviving fires, groundings, and even deliberate scuttling, as if cursed by its own unsolved story. Modern forensics have offered no definitive answers, and perhaps that's why this disappearance lingers. It's not just about missing sailors, it's about the fragility of human logic when faced with the sea's indifference. The Mary reminds us that sometimes, history doesn't give us endings, just endless echoing questions. Fire ripped through the family home on Christmas Eve 1945, but what happened next was stranger than any nightmare. George and managed to escape with 4 of their children, only to realize 5 others, Louis, and were unaccounted for. By morning, the house had burned to its foundation, yet when investigators sifted through the ashes, they found no trace of the missing children's remains. No bones, no teeth, nothing. It was as if the fire had swallowed them whole, or they'd never been there at all. The official explanation pointed to an electrical fire, but they refused to accept it. For one thing, the blaze behaved oddly. Witnesses reported seeing separate fires burning simultaneously in different parts of the house, more like arson than an accident. Then there was the ladder, normally kept propped against the house for emergencies, which had mysteriously vanished that night, leaving the children trapped upstairs. Even stranger. The family's phone line was cut before the fire started, and a neighbor claimed to see a strange man lurking near the property earlier that evening. George spent the rest of his life searching for answers, even plastering billboards across the country with his children's photos. In 1968, he received an anonymous letter postmarked from Kentucky, containing a blurry photo of a young man who bore a striking resemblance to his missing son Louis. The note read, "Louis, I love brother, Merry Christmas." But the trail went cold again, leaving more questions than answers. Could the children have been kidnapped? The believed so, pointing to George's outspoken criticism of fascism. Some speculated the family was targeted for his political views. Others wondered if the kids escaped the fire but, disoriented or afraid, fled into the night and perished unseen. Without definitive proof, theories, human trafficking, witness protection, even organized crime. Decades later, the case remains a gaping wound in West Virginia's history. Modern forensics might uncover clues. Cremated bone fragments can survive even intense heat, but the original investigation was shockingly sloppy. The fire speed, the missing remains, the eerie lack of screams from the upstairs bedroom, none of it adds up. Perhaps the truth lies buried in some unmarked grave, or maybe, as the hope, those 5 children walked away alive, their identities lost to time. Either way, their disappearance stands as a haunting reminder that some mysteries refuse to stay in the past. One moment was a thriving Greek city-state, its streets humming with merchants and philosophers. The next, it was gone, swallowed by the earth and sea in a single night of terror. Ancient historians like Strabo wrote of the disaster in 373 BC, describing how a colossal earthquake split the ground open, followed by a tsunami that dragged the entire city into the depths. For centuries, fate was whispered about like a cautionary tale, a real-life Atlantis lost to the waves. But unlike Atlantis, wasn't just a myth. Its ruins lay hidden for over 2,000 years, waiting for someone to prove the stories true. The breakthrough came in 2001, when archaeologists finally uncovered remains beneath layers of silt and sediment near the Gulf of Corinth. The discovery was staggering. Collapsed walls, shattered pottery, and even human skeletons frozen in poses of flight, as if the victims had tried to outrun the disaster. Here was irrefutable proof that the ancient accounts weren't exaggerations. Had indeed been obliterated in a cataclysm so sudden, its people barely had time to react. What makes story so chilling isn't just the scale of destruction, but the eerie parallels to modern disasters. Scientists now believe the city sat atop a fault line, much like earthquake-prone regions today. When the earth shook, the soft coastal ground, collapsing buildings in seconds. Then came the tsunami, finishing what the quake had started. It's a sequence we've seen repeated in places like Japan and Indonesia, proof that nature's fury hasn't softened with time. Yet's disappearance also raises a haunting question. How many other ancient cities suffered the same fate, vanishing without leaving a trace? The rediscovery reminds us that even the most advanced civilizations are fragile against the whims of the planet. Today, its ruins are a silent classroom, teaching us about seismic risks and the thin line between prosperity and ruin. And perhaps that's the real lesson of this lost city, not just that disasters happen, but that they can erase entire chapters of history in the blink of an eye. The Isles Lighthouse stood empty on December 26, 1900, when a supply ship arrived to find no one waiting to greet them. The door was bolted shut from the inside, as if the keepers had locked themselves out of their own home. Inside, the scene was frozen in eerie stillness. A half-eaten meal sat cold on the table, an overturned chair lay near the hearth, and the clock had stopped ticking. But the 3 experienced lighthouse keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and MacArthur, were nowhere to be found. No struggle, no note, no trail leading to the cliffs, just silence. What could make three seasoned men abandon their post without taking coats or survival gear? The official logbook offered cryptic clues. Marshall's final entry described severe winds the likes of which I have never seen, yet weather records showed calm seas that week. Another note mentioned Duckett being very quiet and MacArthur crying, behavior sharply at odds with their reputations as stoic professionals. Some believe a freak wave swept them from the rocks while they tended the exterior light, but why would all three be outside at once? And why was the door locked behind them? Then there's the darker speculation. The overturned chair suggests a sudden struggle, fueling theories of a violent fight or even murder. Others whisper of supernatural forces. The Isles were long considered haunted by sailors, with locals avoiding them even in daylight. Could the keepers have fled some unseen terror? The most unsettling detail is the lighthouse's location itself, perched on a cliff so high that waves shouldn't reach it. Yet the keepers' oilskin coats hung untouched by the door as if they'd stepped out for a moment in fair weather. The truth may lie in the mundane. Modern researchers propose a tragic accident. One keeper spots a rock slide or collapsing equipment, rushes out, and the others follow in a doomed rescue attempt. But without bodies or definitive evidence, the mystery festers. The Isles' vanishings have seeped into legend, inspiring songs, poems, and endless speculation. It's a reminder that even in our modern age, some disappearances refuse to be solved, leaving behind only questions, a cold meal, and an empty chair. The Springfield Three vanished as if plucked from existence. No struggle, no warning, just an ordinary night in June 1992 that spiraled into one of America's most baffling disappearances. Her daughter and friend Call had spent the evening celebrating high school graduation. By morning, their Springfield, Missouri home stood eerily untouched. Cars in the driveway, purses lined up neatly inside, even a cracked patio globe suggesting someone had stumbled or been forced out. But the women were gone, leaving behind cigarettes still in their packs, coffee mugs waiting to be washed, and a front door locked from the inside. It was as if they'd stepped out for a breath of air and never returned. What makes this case so unsettling is the sheer lack of clues. Most abductions leave traces, a ransom demand, a witness, a shred of forensic evidence. Here there was nothing. Even the broken porch light, initially thought to be a sign of forced entry, might just been a coincidence. Police scoured phone records, interviewed hundreds, even drained a nearby quarry in a desperate search for bodies. Yet 3 decades later, the silence remains unbroken. Theories range from the plausible to the chilling. Some point to ex-boyfriend who had a volatile history, but he had an alibi. Others whisper about a local serial killer active at the time, though no evidence connects him to the scene. Then there's the bizarre tip about a man seen scrubbing a van at a car wash that night, a van later found abandoned with traces of bleach. But like every other lead, it dissolved into dead ends. Perhaps the most haunting detail is the voicemail. In the days after the disappearance, friend reported hearing a strange, muffled message on her answering machine, a male voice muttering, then a sharp click. By the time investigators listened, the tape had been accidentally erased. Was it a taunt from the abductor, a wrong number, another question with no answer? The Springfield Three's disappearance taps into a primal fear, the idea that safety is an illusion. These women weren't hiking in the wilderness or traveling abroad. They were in a suburban home surrounded by neighbors. Their story lingers not just because it's unsolved, but because it forces us to confront how easily ordinary lives can unravel. Every few years, a new tip surfaces, a dug-up basement, a cryptic letter, but the truth stays buried. And so the house on Delaware Avenue stands as a silent monument to 3 voices that should have been heard, and the unsettling reality that some mysteries refuse to speak. For nearly 500 years, the Norse settlements of Greenland thrived. Farms dotted the fjords, churches rose from the rocky soil, and trade ships carried walrus ivory and furs back to Europe. Then, by the mid-15th century, silence. The last written record of these settlers is a marriage certificate dated 1408. After that, nothing. When European ships finally returned to Greenland's shores decades later, they found only abandoned homesteads, empty pews, and the creeping ice reclaiming what humans had built. How could an entire society, one that had weathered centuries of Arctic winters, simply dissolve into history? The most obvious culprit is the cold. Tree rings and ice core samples tell a chilling story. The Little Ice Age was tightening its grip, turning already marginal farmland into frozen wasteland. Crops failed, pastures shrank, and the sea ice that once protected fishing grounds now choked the fjords for longer each year. But climate alone doesn't explain everything. The Norse were stubbornly traditional. They clung to European farming practices, refusing to adopt the Inuit hunting techniques that might have saved them. Excavations of their garbage piles reveal a grim truth. As the weather worsened, they ate their livestock down to the bones, then starved. Yet there are darker threads in this tapestry. Recent archaeological work hints at conflict. Inuit oral histories speak of skirmishes, and Norse artifacts have been found repurposed in Inuit camps. Did the two groups clash over dwindling resources? Or did the Norse, in their desperation, attempt to integrate only to vanish into the broader population? Some evidence points to a frantic exodus, abandoned boats, hastily packed tools, and the eerie absence of graves. If they fled, where did they go? The most tantalizing clue comes from Iceland's archives, claims that some Greenlanders sailed west, perhaps reaching North America decades before Columbus. But unlike the sagas of Vinland, these voyages left no trace. The last Norse of Greenland may have disappeared not into death, but into legend, their fate as elusive as the Arctic mist. Today, their ruins stand as silent witnesses to a haunting truth. Even the hardiest civilizations are no match for a changing world when tradition outweighs adaptation. The Pass incident begins like any other wilderness expedition. 9 experienced hikers trekking through Russia's mountains in January 1959, their tent pitched on the snowy slopes of a name that would later translate to Mountain of the Dead. But by morning, their campsite lay in ruins. The tent had been slashed open from the inside, as if the group had fled in blind panic. Footprints led away into the darkness, some barefoot, others clad only in socks, despite temperatures plunging to negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit. None of them survived. When search teams finally recovered the bodies weeks later, the scene grew even more chilling. 2 victims were found near a makeshift fire, dressed in scraps of clothing torn from the others. 3 more lay frozen in poses suggesting they'd been crawling back toward camp. The remaining 4 were discovered deeper in the forest, their bodies bearing gruesome injuries, crushed ribs, fractured skulls, one hiker missing her tongue, another with his eyes gouged out. And yet there were no signs of a struggle, no animal attacks, no obvious explanation for why skilled mountaineers would abandon safety for certain death. At first, Soviet investigators blamed a compelling natural force, closing the case with vague references to an avalanche. But the details didn't fit. The slope wasn't steep enough for a deadly slide, and the hikers' footprints leading away were too orderly for a panicked escape. Then came the eerie anomalies, radiation detected on some clothing, reports of strange orange lights in the sky that night, and rumors that one victim's tongue may have been removed by scavengers after death. Conspiracy theories exploded. Had the group stumbled upon a secret military experiment, been attacked by indigenous tribes, or encountered something far more otherworldly? Modern researchers have tried to untangle the mystery with science. In 2020, a simulation suggested a rare slab avalanche could explain the injuries, a sudden collapse of dense snow snapping bones like twigs. But why would seasoned hikers who'd camped in safer spots just nights before choose such a risky location? And why were some bodies so far from the tent as if they'd been carried or dragged? The files offer no clarity, only redactions and contradictions. What lingers isn't just the horror of their deaths, but the profound violation of logic. These weren't novices, they were engineers, athletes, and outdoor experts. Their diaries, recovered at the scene, show no hint of distress until those final hours. The last photograph, developed from a roll of film found in the snow, shows them smiling around a campfire, unaware they were posing for their own epitaph. Perhaps that's why this case endures, not just for its grotesque details, but for the unbearable question it leaves hanging. What force, natural or not, could reduce 9 rational people to primal terror? The past doesn't just hide answers. It taunts us with the possibility that some truths, no matter how much we dig, refuse to be uncovered. Spent his life crafting tales of the bizarre and unsettling, stories where reality blurred into nightmare, where characters vanished without explanation. So perhaps it's no surprise that his own disappearance reads like one of his grim fictions. In the fall of 1913, the 71-year-old writer, already a legend for works like The Devil's Dictionary and An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, set off for Mexico. His stated goal, to witness the chaos of Villa's revolution firsthand, but those who knew him sensed something darker. To be a gringo in Mexico, he wrote in his last known letter, is to court death. Then, like one of his own doomed protagonists, he stepped off the edge of history. His final months were a swirl of contradictions. He'd left Washington with a flourish, telling reporters he was going to Mexico with a pretty definite purpose, which, however, is not at present. Was it journalistic curiosity or a deliberate march toward oblivion? His letters from the road veered between dark humor and eerie resignation. "If you hear of my being stood up against a Mexican stone wall and shot to rags," he quipped to a friend, "please know that I think it a pretty good way to depart this life." By December 1913, he joined Villa's army as an observer, even reportedly participating in the Battle of, then, Silence. The last confirmed sighting placed him in Chihuahua, after which the trail vanished as completely as a ghost in the desert. Theories about his fate multiply like shadows at dusk. Some say he was executed by Villa's men, a firing squad's bullet ensuring his cryptic exit. Others insist he staged his own disappearance, slipping into anonymity to become the ultimate unreliable narrator of his life's final chapter. A handful of reports trickled in over the years. A Texas miner claimed to have buried after finding him wounded near. A missionary swore he'd seen the writer living as a hermit in the Sierra Madre. But no grave, no diary, no definitive clue ever surfaced. What makes Vanishing so haunting isn't just the mystery, it's the cruel irony. Here was a man who'd spent decades dissecting human folly and the fragility of existence, only to become his own most enigmatic character. His stories often ended with twists that left readers unsettled, questioning reality itself. And in the end, so did his life. Whether he fell to revolutionaries, the desert, or his own design, his exit was pure, abrupt, unresolved, and drenched in the macabre. The master of the unsettling fade to black left his audience, the world, with no curtain call, only darkness and the echo of a question. December 5, 1945 began as a routine training mission. 5 U.S. Navy Avenger bombers lifting off from Fort Lauderdale's Naval Air Station, 14 crewmen aboard, practicing navigation over the Atlantic. But by afternoon, Flight 19's radio transmissions turned frantic. The squadron's leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported compass failures, disorientation, and an unsettling realization. We can't be sure of any direction. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should. As daylight faded, their signals grew weaker until static swallowed them whole. Then, in a cruel twist, one of the search planes sent to find them, a PBM Mariner with 13 more souls, also vanished without a trace. The Navy launched the largest air and sea search in history at the time, scouring over 300,000 square miles. Yet not a single life raft, oil slick, or scrap of debris was ever found. The official explanation blamed Taylor's inexperience, suggesting he'd misjudged their position and led the squadron hopelessly off course until they ran out of fuel. But the details gnaw at that theory. These weren't rookies. Most of the crew had logged hundreds of flight hours. The Avengers were built to float, so why no wreckage? And why did the Mariner, equipped with life rafts and radios, disappear so abruptly? The Bermuda Triangle already had a reputation by then, a stretch of ocean between Florida, Rico, and Bermuda, where ships and planes seemed to vanish more often than statistics could explain. Flight 19's tragedy cemented its legend, spawning theories that range from the scientific to the supernatural. Some point to methane hydrates, vast bubbles of gas erupting from capable of swallowing ships by reducing water density. Others cite electromagnetic anomalies disrupting instruments or rogue waves that strike without warning. Then there are the more outlandish ideas, alien abductions, time warps, or even Atlantis's mythical energy crystals pulling vessels into the depths. The truth likely lies in the triangle's unique geography, a convergence of the Gulf Stream's fierce currents, sudden squalls, and shallow reefs that can scatter wreckage across miles. Yet the absence of any physical evidence from Flight 19 remains unprecedented. What lingers isn't just the mystery, but the chilling audio from that final radio call. One pilot's voice crackling through the static. All planes close up tight, we'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together. It's a haunting epitaph for men who knew they were lost, a reminder that even in our modern age, the sea keeps its secrets well. The Bermuda Triangle may not be cursed, but Flight 19's fate ensures we'll never look at those waters the same way again. The Battle of was supposed to be another glorious Roman conquest, until it became one of history's most devastating military disasters. In 53 BC, the wealthy general led 7 legions, nearly 40,000 men, into the deserts of Parthia, hungry for gold and glory. Instead, they met a nightmare. Outmaneuvered by horse archers and suffocated by the relentless heat, the Romans were slaughtered. Himself was captured and executed, his mouth famously filled with molten gold as a grotesque symbol of his greed. But the real mystery lies in the survivors. Ancient sources claim 10,000 Roman prisoners were marched eastward into the heart of Persia and then vanished without another word. What became of these lost legionaries? Some scholars argue they were simply absorbed into the Parthian Empire, forced into slavery or military service. There are tantalizing hints of Roman soldiers reappearing centuries later as far east as China, where historians mention foreign mercenaries with fish-scale formations, a possible reference to the segmented armor of legionaries. Others suggest a darker fate. Mass executions in remote valleys or mines, their bones scattered where no archaeologist would ever find them. Yet the most compelling theory is also the most hopeful. In western China, near the town of villagers with startling European features, green eyes, fair hair, even DNA linking them to the Mediterranean, have long claimed descent from ancient warriors. Could these be the descendants of lost legion? The evidence is thin but haunting. Excavations in the region have uncovered Roman-style fortifications and artifacts, including a bronze helmet eerily similar to those worn by Caesar's troops. The disappearance of legions isn't just a historical footnote. It's a stark reminder of war's ability to erase entire communities from the record. These weren't just soldiers. They were sons, fathers, craftsmen, and dreamers, swallowed by the sands of a foreign land. Their story lingers not just in dusty scrolls, but in the faces of strangers half a world away, who might still carry their blood and their unresolved legacy. Whether they perished in obscurity or founded forgotten dynasties, their silence speaks volumes about the fragility of human memory and the echoes war leaves behind. The USS Cyclops was a steel giant of the seas, a 540-foot-long Navy collier tasked with hauling coal and supplies during World War I. But in March 1918, this mammoth vessel and its 309 crew members vanished somewhere between Barbados and the Chesapeake Bay, leaving behind not so much as a life jacket or an oil slick. It remains the single largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. Navy history, a disappearance so complete it defies logic. What makes the Cyclops' fate so unsettling isn't just the scale of the loss, it's the eerie normalcy of its final hours. The ship's last radio transmission reported nothing amiss, just routine weather updates. Captain George, a seasoned mariner with a reputation for eccentricity, gave no indication of distress. Even the sea itself seemed calm that day, with no reported storms along the Cyclops route. And yet, by the time the Navy realized the ship was overdue, there was nothing to find. No wreckage, no floating debris, just an empty stretch of ocean where a 10,000-ton vessel should have been. Theories abound, each more haunting than the last. Some point to structural failure. The Cyclops was known to have a weak hull design, prone to buckling under heavy loads. Others whisper of sabotage, suggesting the ship's cargo of manganese ore, a volatile material, might have triggered an explosion. Then there's the Bermuda Triangle connection. Though the Cyclops disappeared decades before the triangle became infamous, its vanishing fits the pattern of ships and planes lost without a trace in that region. But the most chilling possibility involves the wartime shadows of 1918. German U-boats prowled those waters, and though no submarine claimed credit for sinking the Cyclops, some speculate it fell victim to a rogue attack, or even that its crew steering the ship into enemy hands. A few scattered reports surfaced over the years. A lifeboat found adrift in the Caribbean, a cryptic logbook entry hinting at unrest among the crew, but none led to answers. The Navy's official investigation closed with a baffling admission. The disappearance of this ship has been one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy. No other case, before or since, has seen such a massive vessel disappear so utterly. Modern sonar searches have turned up nothing, leaving the Cyclops' final resting place as much a mystery as its fate. Perhaps the ocean floor holds the truth, buried beneath centuries of silt and silence. Until then, the Cyclops remains a ghost ship in the truest sense, swallowed whole by the sea, taking its secrets to the depths. The cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde cling to the sandstone like swallows' nests, hundreds of rooms carved into the rock, their windows staring blankly across the canyons. These were the homes of the Anasazi, or Ancestral, a people who thrived in the American Southwest for centuries, building intricate communities and mastering the art of desert survival. Then, around 1300, something shifted. The pottery wheels stopped turning. The hearths grew cold. And one by one, the families packed what they could carry and walked away from the only homes they'd ever known, leaving behind everything from half-woven baskets to ceremonial masks still hanging on the walls. At first glance, the answer seems obvious: drought. Tree rings tell a story of relentless aridity in the late 13th century, a dry spell so severe it cracked the earth and emptied the streams. The Ancestral were masterful water engineers, their reservoirs and canals still visible today, but even they couldn't outlast a drought that stretched for decades. Yet climate alone doesn't explain the urgency. Some doors were sealed shut from the outside as if to keep something in. Others show signs of fire, not from accident but intentional burning. And then there are the bones, scattered remains with marks that suggest violence, even cannibalism. Was this a society torn apart by famine and war, or were they fleeing something worse? The mystery deepens when we ask where they went. Oral traditions from modern Pueblo tribes like the Hopians speak of a great migration, a journey guided by spiritual leaders to find new homes. Archaeologists have traced their path south and east, where strikingly similar architecture and pottery appear in places like the Valley. But here, the haunting part. The descendants of the Anasazi still live among us, yet their ancestors' final days in those cliff dwellings remain a carefully guarded secret. Some Pueblo elders say the details are too sacred to share. Others hint that the past holds warnings they'd rather not name. Perhaps the most unsettling clue lies in the ruins themselves. At places like Cliff Palace and Balcony House, Ladders once used to climb between levels were pulled up, as if the last person to leave wanted to ensure no one could follow. It's a gesture that feels less like abandonment and more like a ritual, a closing of a door between worlds. Today, standing in those silent rooms, you can almost hear the echoes of a question. Did the Anasazi disappear, or did they simply become someone else? Their story isn't just about a vanished people. It's about the resilience of culture, the weight of memory, and the quiet truth that some departures aren't endings, but transformations. Beach should have been safe, sun-drenched, crowded, the kind of place where parents felt comfortable letting children play while they lounged nearby. That's why Jim and Nancy Beaumont thought nothing of letting their 3 kids, Jane, 9, 7, and 4-year-old Grant, walk the short distance to the shore alone on Australia Day 1966. The siblings had done it before, always returning by noon for lunch. But this time the clock ticked past 12, then 1, then 2. By 3 p.m. the Beaumonts were frantic. Their children had vanished without a single scream, a scrap of clothing, or even a witness who could say for certain what happened to them. What followed was a search that gripped the nation. Police combed the beach, dredged nearby waterways, and interviewed hundreds of sunbathers. A few fragments of memory emerged: a tall, blonde man seen playing with the children near the water, a girl resembling Jane spotted later at a nearby shop buying pastries with an unknown man. But these clues dissolved like footprints in wet sand. No ransom note arrived. No credible sightings followed. The Beaumont children had slipped out of existence as completely as if the ocean itself had reached up and taken them. The case shattered Australia's post-war innocence, rewriting the rules of parenting in an instant. Suddenly, the idea of unsupervised play seemed unthinkable. Neighborhoods installed safe house programs and schools began teaching stranger danger. Yet for all the cultural shifts, the investigation stalled. Suspects came and went: a convicted child killer, a psychic-obsessed factory worker, even a German tourist who later drowned his own family. But without bodies or forensic evidence, police faced a wall of silence. Decades later, the mystery still pulses with raw pain. In 2013, construction crews tore up a factory floor in Adelaide after a tip claimed the children were buried there, only to find nothing. Another theory suggests they were smuggled overseas, their identities erased. But the most haunting possibility is that their abductor lived among them, a phantom hiding in plain sight, his crime so brazen it belief. What lingers isn't just the absence of answers, but the unbearable weight of that empty beach. The Beaumont case isn't just about 3 missing children. It's about the moment a country lost its sense of security, when the world learned that even in broad daylight, under a crowd's gaze, darkness could still find a way in. Every few years, a new tip reopens the wound, but the truth remains as elusive as the laughter of those 3 siblings, forever frozen in black and white photographs, never growing older, never coming home. The shifting sands of California's Colorado desert hide more than just rattlesnakes and tumbleweeds. They guard one of history's most tantalizing legends. Picture this: a Spanish galleon, its hull bursting with pearls, gold, and Jesuit treasures, stranded miles from the nearest ocean after a freak storm in the 1600s. Local tribes spoke of seeing it half buried in the dunes, its masts splintered like broken bones. By the time prospectors and adventurers came looking, the desert had swallowed it whole, leaving behind only whispers and a question: how could an entire ship vanish in a land without water? The story begins with the Spanish colonization of the Americas, when galleons laden with plundered wealth sailed up the Gulf of California. Some historians point to a notorious storm in 1615 that may have hurled a ship inland via a since dried-up waterway. Others cite the journals of missionary Kino, who wrote of indigenous accounts describing a great canoe abandoned in the dunes. But here, where the mystery deepens, the desert is relentless. Over centuries, winds reshaped the landscape, burying and unearthing relics without rhyme or reason. A ship could lie hidden for decades, only to briefly emerge before vanishing again beneath the sands. Treasure hunters have chased this mirage for generations. In the 1870s, a prospector named Charlie claimed to find the ship's weathered timbers near present-day Imperial Valley, but a sandstorm erased the site before he could return. In the 1930s, a pilot swore he spotted the outline of a vessel from the air, but ground searches turned up nothing. Even modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, has failed to pin down the ghostly galleon. Skeptics dismiss the tale as pure folklore, a desert-born delusion fueled by gold rush greed. They argue no Spanish records mention a lost ship so far inland, yet archaeology keeps teasing the possibility. In 2015, researchers found 16th-century Spanish cannonballs near the sea, far from any known trade route. Could these be fragments of the legendary treasure ship, scattered by time and looters, or just remnants of a forgotten expedition? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between history and myth. The desert has a way of warping reality. Heat haze conjuring lakes where none exist, winds carving monuments that look like ruins. Maybe the ship isn't a physical wreck at all, but a metaphor for the countless treasures swallowed by colonial ambitions, their stories buried as surely as any galleon. Or maybe, just maybe, those dunes still cradle their secret, waiting for the right storm to reveal it. Until then, the lost ship remains the ultimate desert phantom, real enough to haunt us, elusive enough to keep us dreaming. The sand pod houses stood like something from a science fiction film, rows of identical futuristic domes hugging Taiwan's northern coast, built as a luxury retreat for the wealthy elite. By 1980, they'd become something far stranger, the stage for one of Asia's most baffling disappearances. Overnight, the entire community, residents, staff, even pets, vanished. Tables were set with meals half-eaten. Televisions flickered with static in empty living rooms. Cars sat idling in driveways, doors ajar, as if their owners had been plucked away mid-motion. When authorities arrived, they found no signs of struggle, no farewell notes, just an eerie stillness that clung to the pastel-colored domes like fog. Officially, the incident was brushed aside. The Taiwanese government cited structural hazards, swiftly demolishing the entire complex. But whispers spread like wildfire. Locals spoke of a doomed utopia, a place where residents had reportedly complained of sleepless nights and shared hallucinations. Shadowy figures watching from the shoreline, whispers in languages no one recognized. Some claimed the pods were built on cursed land, a former World War II execution site where restless spirits demanded retribution. Others pointed to darker human forces, rumors of cult activity, mass suicides orchestrated by a charismatic leader, or even a failed government experiment gone wrong. The most chilling theory emerged from fishermen along the coast. On the night of the disappearance, several reported strange lights hovering over the water, pulsing orbs that moved against the wind before vanishing into the clouds. Could the pod people have been taken, not by earthly hands, but by something beyond our understanding? Skeptics dismiss this as hysteria, noting the area's frequent military drills and the possibility of aircraft. Yet the absence of bodies, or any attempt to locate them, fuels suspicions of a cover-up. Decades later, all that remains are grainy photographs and a concrete slab where the pods once stood. The truth might lie buried in classified documents or scattered in the memories of aging witnesses. But the sand mystery endures as a warning, a reminder that even in our modern age, entire communities can slip through the cracks of history, leaving behind only questions and the unsettling sense that some doors, once closed, were never meant to be reopened. The Arctic winds howl differently over lake, a sound that carries whispers of one of Canada's most chilling disappearances. In November 1930, fur trapper Joe snowshoed into the small Inuit village, expecting the usual greetings, the smell of cooking meat, the laughter of children playing on the ice. Instead, he found silence. The tent stood intact, pots of stew still simmering over smoldering fires, as if the entire community had stepped out moments before. But no one returned. Not that day, not ever. What discovered next turned unease into dread. The village's sled dogs lay dead, tangled in their harnesses, their bodies frozen stiff not from the cold but from starvation. These were animals bred for survival, capable of enduring the harshest winters, yet they'd been left tied up, forgotten, as if their owners had vanished mid-task. Even more unnerving, the snow revealed no footprints leading away, no signs of struggle or forced departure. It was as though the villagers had simply dissolved into the frigid air. Local Inuit tribes refused to camp near the lake afterward, speaking of shadowy figures said to walk between worlds. Some trappers claimed to hear ghostly voices on the wind, while others reported strange lights flickering over the ice in the dead of winter. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched an investigation, but their report only deepened the mystery. No bodies were found, no evidence of disease or conflict, just an empty village frozen in time, its story abruptly cut off. Historians offer practical theories. Perhaps the villagers fled an impending disaster, a sudden avalanche threat, or a rabid animal attack, though this doesn't explain why they'd abandon food and shelter in the heart of winter. Others suggest mass hysteria or a collective spiritual calling, but these are guesses draped in folklore. The most chilling possibility: the Arctic itself is a vast, indifferent witness. Blizzards can erase trails in minutes. Thin ice can swallow a person without a ripple. Yet even these explanations feel inadequate when faced with the sheer completeness of the disappearance. Its legacy lingers like the Northern Lights, beautiful, haunting, and impossible to grasp. Modern searches have turned up nothing, and the lake remains a place of uneasy quiet. Whatever happened here, the truth is buried deeper than permafrost, wrapped in layers of myth and unanswered questions. The villagers' absence isn't just a mystery. It's a reminder that even in our mapped and measured world, some places still hold secrets too cold to tell. The jungle has a way of swallowing men whole, but few disappearances haunt the imagination like that of. In April 1925, the seasoned British explorer penned a final letter to his wife from the edge of the Amazon, brimming with confidence. He was close, he insisted, to finding what he called the City of Z, a legendary metropolis hidden in the green hell of Brazil, rumored to hold untold riches and ancient secrets. Then, with his son Jack and their friend Raleigh, he stepped into the undergrowth near the river. Not a single member of the party was ever seen again. Wasn't just any adventurer. At 58, he'd spent decades mapping uncharted regions of South America, surviving malaria, hostile tribes, and near starvation. His theories about a lost Amazonian civilization, once mocked by academics, were rooted in fragments of truth: pottery shards, overgrown roads, and indigenous tales of cities that shone. But his obsession came at a cost. By the time he mounted his final expedition, he'd grown reckless, dismissing warnings about the warlike people and abandoning backup plans in his fervor to prove his dream real. The last known trace of his team was a message sent back with indigenous guides, a scrap of paper bearing coordinates and the words, "We hope to get through this region in a few days." After that, silence. When rescue missions failed to find even a button or a bullet casing, rumors spiraled. Some claimed had been killed by arrows, his body hidden in a secret grave. Others insisted he'd found his city and chosen to live there, adopting a new identity among its people. The wildest tales spoke of a white-haired hermit spotted in the jungle decades later, muttering in English, but no proof ever surfaced. For years, the mystery seemed destined to stay buried beneath vines and time. Then in the 21st century, satellite imaging revealed something astonishing. The Amazon wasn't the untouched wilderness Europeans had assumed. Vast geometric earthworks, remnants of fortified villages, and even evidence of urban planning suggested sophisticated civilizations had thrived there long before Columbus. City of Z might not have been gold paved, but it wasn't pure fantasy either. Yet the greater revelation came in 2005, when an elder shared an oral history passed down for generations. His ancestors, he said, had watched the foreigners grow weak, their gifts unwanted. They'd warned to turn back. When he refused, the tribe let the jungle finish what they wouldn't. No grand battle, no treasure, just 3 men swallowed by the indifferent wild, their bones claimed by roots and river mud. His legacy is a paradox. He was wrong about the details, but eerily prescient about the Amazon's secrets. His disappearance became a cautionary tale about obsession, but also a beacon for explorers who followed. Even now, the jungle keeps its final secrets close. The truth about its fate may lie somewhere between the memories and the silent stones of those lost cities, proof that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only pondered in the dappled light beneath the canopy. The SS was meant to be Australia's pride, a state-of-the-art steamship billed as unsinkable, designed to ferry passengers between Europe and the Southern Hemisphere in luxury. But in July 1909, just months after its maiden voyage, the ship and all 211 souls aboard vanished without so much as a distress call. One moment, it was sighted off the coast of South Africa, battling heavy seas. The next, it was gone, swallowed by the Indian Ocean as if it had never existed. No lifeboats, no floating debris, not even an oil slick marked its grave. The silence was so absolute, so unnerving, that some wondered if they had simply sailed into another dimension. Theories about its fate range from the plausible to the paranormal. The most widely accepted explanation points to a rogue wave, a wall of water towering over 100 feet, capable of capsizing even the sturdiest vessel in seconds. This design, top-heavy with cargo and passenger decks, might have made it especially vulnerable. Then there's the coal dust theory. Improperly stored fuel could have ignited, triggering a catastrophic explosion that tore the ship apart before anyone could react. But if that were the case, why didn't nearby vessels report hearing anything? Even the Castle, the last ship to spot the, noted nothing amiss beyond rough seas. Then come the whispers, the eerie accounts from sailors who claim to have seen a ghostly steamer matching this description, drifting lifelessly in the fog decades after its disappearance. Some say its lights still flicker on stormy nights, a phantom crew forever trapped in their final moments. Skeptics dismiss these sightings as mirages or wishful thinking, but the stories persist, fed by the ocean's refusal to give up its secrets. What makes this disappearance so haunting isn't just the scale of the loss, it's the lack of closure. Most shipwrecks leave some trace, a bell, a nameplate, a single survivor to tell the tale. Here, there's nothing. Modern searches with sonar and submersibles have scoured the suspected wreck site, but the seabed remains stubbornly empty. This fate is a gap in maritime history, a reminder that even in our age of satellites and sensors, the sea can still keep its dead. Perhaps that's why this mystery endures. It's not just about a missing ship, it's about the unsettling idea that something so large, so solid, can vanish without a ripple. The story lingers like a shadow on the waves, a question mark etched into the ocean's surface. And until the depths choose to speak, we're left staring at the horizon, wondering if the answers will ever wash ashore. The night of February 24th, 1978 began like any other for the County Five. 5 close friends with mild intellectual disabilities who bonded over basketball games and weekly outings in rural California. After cheering on their team at Chico State, they piled into Ted's Mercury, a car so familiar the route home should have been muscle memory. But instead of turning toward, the vehicle veered inexplicably into the snow-choked wilderness of the National Forest. What followed was a disappearance so baffling, so laced with eerie clues, that it remains one of America's most haunting cold cases. Days later, searchers found the car abandoned on a remote logging road, its gas tank full and engine dead, as if the men had simply walked away. Footprints led deeper into the woods, but here what made no sense. The group had left jackets and food in the car despite freezing temperatures, and one member, Gary, had even left behind his essential schizophrenia medication. For weeks, hope flickered until a lone snowplow driver stumbled upon a scene straight from a nightmare. 20 miles from the car, inside a locked Forest Service cabin, lay Ted's emaciated body. He'd survived for months, surrounded by untouched survival supplies, canned food, firewood, even a working propane heater. Why hadn't he used them? And where were the others? The deeper investigators dug, the stranger the details became. His boots were found neatly placed outside the cabin, as if he'd removed them before vanishing into the snow. Another man's glasses rested on a railroad tie miles away, as though placed there deliberately. Then there was the cabin itself. Its door had to be broken down, yet the key hung just inside, suggesting someone had locked it from within. Was this panic, paranoia, or something more sinister? Theories spiral like the mountain winds that hid their trail. Some believe the men, disoriented by snow or an undiagnosed medical event, succumbed to hypothermia's delirium. Others whisper of foul play, history of mental illness-fueled speculation he might have harmed the group, though no evidence supports this. The darkest possibility, that someone lured them into those woods deliberately, exploiting their trusting natures. But with 4 bodies still missing and no witnesses, the truth is as buried as the footprints the snow erased. What lingers isn't just the mystery, but the crushing weight of what if. These weren't reckless adventurers. They were vulnerable men who relied on routine, whose families trusted they'd come home. Their story forces us to confront how easily safety nets fail, how quickly a wrong turn can become a tragedy with no answers. The forest keeps its secrets locked tight, and the County Five remain frozen in time, forever mid-journey, forever just out of reach. The Isles don't just hide the mystery of 3 vanished lighthouse keepers. They whisper older, darker secrets. Long before that empty lighthouse echoed with unanswered questions, sailors avoided these jagged cliffs, calling more the island of the phantom people. Ancient mariners spoke of flickering lights where no flame should be, of voices carried on the wind from uninhabited shores. Even the name itself hints at something uncanny, derived from a 7th century saint rumored to have banished restless spirits from the Isles. Were these just tall tales spun by superstitious fishermen, or did the legends carry a warning the keepers should heed it? Centuries of folklore paint more as a place where the veil between worlds grows thin. One persistent tale describes a spectral procession, shadowy figures in robes seen marching along the cliffs, their faces hidden, their footsteps silent. Another account tells of a lone figure standing atop the island's highest point, arms raised as if summoning a storm. Locals swore these apparitions appeared before shipwrecks, as though the island itself were a harbinger of doom. And then there are the lights, strange, dancing orbs reported by sailors even on moonless nights, vanishing the moment a ship drew near. Modern researchers have tried to rationalize these stories. Could the phantom lights have been bioluminescent algae or methane flares from rotting seaweed? Might the voices have been the eerie howls of wind funneling through sea caves? But these explanations feel hollow when stacked against the sheer consistency of the accounts. The stories span generations, told by hard-nosed fishermen and coastal villagers with no reason to invent such details. The most unsettling possibility is that the lighthouse keepers weren't the first to vanish on moor, just the first to leave behind a documented trail. Records from the 1800s mention a shepherd who supposedly lived on the island, tending sheep that mysteriously thrived despite the barren terrain. When a supply boat arrived one autumn, they found his hut intact, a pot of stew still warm on the hearth, but the man himself was gone. No note, no struggle, just another empty dwelling swallowed by the island's silence. What if the truth lies not in the keeper's actions, but in the land itself? Geologists note that the Isles sit atop a network of fault lines, where tectonic pressure could theoretically generate infrasound, frequencies too low for human ears to detect, but capable of inducing dread, disorientation, even hallucinations. Could the island's very geology have warped the keeper's perceptions, driving them to flee some unseen terror? Or did they, like the shepherd before them, encounter something far older, something that doesn't belong in our world? The lighthouse still stands today, its beam cutting through the same mists that hid the keeper's fate. Visitors brave enough to land on more describe an oppressive stillness, a sense of being watched from the cliffs. Whether the island is cursed, haunted, or simply a stage for nature's tricks, one thing is certain: some places refuse to surrender their secrets. The Isles don't just guard the mystery of three missing men. They hold a mirror to our deepest fear, that there are corners of this earth where the rules don't apply, and where disappearance isn't an accident but an inevitability. The fire that consumed the home should have left answers in its ashes, but instead it deepened the mystery. When investigators sifted through the rubble, they found something that logic, no trace of the 5 missing children's remains. Modern forensics tells us that even the most intense fires rarely obliterate bones completely, especially teeth, which can survive temperatures over 2,000 degrees. Yet not a single fragment was recovered, not even from the basement where some of the children were thought to be sleeping. This glaring absence fueled theories that the fire wasn't an accident at all, but a cover-up, a staged tragedy designed to hide something far darker. Then there's the blocked well. In the chaos of the blaze, George discovered that the family's water source, normally accessible, had been inexplicably sealed with a heavy object. Was this sabotage, a desperate attempt to slow the firefighters, or something even more sinister? The well was never properly searched, leaving a haunting question. Could it have been used to dispose of evidence? Years later, a deathbed confession added another layer to the enigma. A former neighbor, on his dying breath, allegedly told a priest he'd been part of a group that kidnapped the children that night, spiriting them away to a waiting car. The motive: revenge. George, an outspoken critic of fascism, had drawn the ire of local figures with ties to organized crime. But without corroborating evidence, this confession remains a shadowy whisper, tantalizing but unproven. The most heartbreaking possibility is that the children survived. In 1968, they received a blurred photograph in the mail, a young man who bore a striking resemblance to their missing son, Louis. The cryptic note accompanying it only deepened the intrigue. "Louis, I love brother, Merry Christmas." Private investigators traced the postmark to Kentucky, but the trail went cold. Could the children have been trafficked, forced into new identities? Or did they, in some unimaginable twist, grow up unaware of their true past? Without bodies or definitive proof, the case remains an open wound. The family transformed their grief into a relentless search, plastering billboards across the country and offering rewards for information. Even today, their descendants keep the story alive, a testament to the unbearable weight of not knowing. The fire took more than a home that night. It stole a family's peace, leaving behind only questions that burn as fiercely as the flames themselves. The desert stretches across southern Africa like a vast, sun-bleached canvas, endless dunes and scrubland where the horizon shimmers in the heat. But in 1885, an explorer named returned from this harsh landscape with an extraordinary claim. He discovered the ruins of a lost city, half buried in the sand. His sketches showed crumbling walls, massive stone blocks, and strange carvings unlike anything built by nearby tribes. Other adventurers soon reported similar findings. Some spoke of a sprawling metropolis with arched gateways and courtyards, others of monolithic statues peering from the dunes. Yet every time an expedition tried to pin down the location, the city seemed to slip away, leaving behind only whispers and frustration. What makes this vanishing act so tantalizing is the sheer consistency of the descriptions. Wasn't some starry-eyed amateur. He was a seasoned showman and adventurer who'd crossed the on foot. His detailed accounts described masonry so precise it rivaled the Inca ruins of South America, and artifacts suggesting a civilization far older than any known in the region. Later explorers, like the British officer Williams in the 1950s, claimed to find stone circles and pottery shards in the same area, fragments that hinted at a sophisticated, forgotten culture. But when archaeologists followed up, the trail went cold. The stones had seemingly vanished, or worse, had never existed at all. Skeptics argue the lost city was nothing more than a mirage, a trick of the desert light playing on natural rock formations. The is notorious for its phantoms. Heat distortion can warp distant hills into the illusion of towers, and wind-sculpted stone can mimic carved pillars. Even admitted his initial sighting might have been deceptive, writing, "The ruins were so weathered they blended into the land itself." But this explanation doesn't account for the physical artifacts later explorers documented, or the indigenous sand people's oral histories, which speak of a great village of stone swallowed by the sands long ago. The most compelling theory: the city isn't lost, it's hiding in plain sight. Recent geological surveys suggest vast portions of the were once lush and habitable, with rivers and lakes that dried up ago. Could the ruins lie beneath the dunes, buried so deeply that only fleeting glimpses surface during rare windstorms? Satellite imagery has revealed faint, grid-like patterns in remote areas, tantalizing hints of human-made structures. But the is unforgiving. Its shifting sands erase trails within hours, and its remoteness makes large-scale excavations nearly impossible. The legend endures because it speaks to something primal, the idea that even in our mapped and measured world, there are still places where history refuses to be pinned down. Whether the lost city is a mirage, a buried metropolis, or something in between, it taunts us with the possibility that the desert guards its secrets jealously. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only pondered under the relentless sun, where the line between truth and mirage blurs into the unknown. The MV should have been easy to spot, a sturdy 69-foot vessel painted bright white, designed to weather the rough Pacific seas. Yet when it was found drifting near Fiji in November 1955, its hull battered and decks deserted, the ship looked more like a ghostly apparition than a modern merchant craft. The strangest part, every lifeboat was still. The radio, though set to the emergency frequency, had its wires cut. A doctor's surgical bag sat open in the cabin, its contents spilling across blood-stained floorboards. And of the 25 passengers and crew who'd set sail from Samoa weeks earlier, not a single soul remained to explain what had happened. At first glance, the scene screamed mutiny. This captain, a seasoned mariner named Thomas Miller, had reportedly clashed with his crew over the ship's deteriorating condition. Leaky pipes, failing engines, and a hull patched with makeshift repairs made the voyage risky, so risky that one crewman allegedly jumped ship before departure. Could frustration have boiled over into violence? Investigators found a cache of firearms, all accounted for and unused, which complicated the theory. Then there were the bloodstains, small but ominous, concentrated near the bridge. Yet without bodies or witnesses, even this evidence raised more questions than answers. Others pointed to the ocean itself as the culprit. It was notoriously unstable, its watertight compartments compromised by years of neglect. A sudden storm or rogue wave could have flooded the lower decks, forcing survivors to abandon ship in panic. But why leave the lifeboats behind? And why were the engines still idling when the ship was found, as if the crew had stepped away mid-task? The most baffling detail was the ship's position, hundreds of miles off course, drifting in the opposite direction from where distress signals would have been expected. Then came the whispers of something darker. Local islanders spoke of the long before its rediscovery, calling it a cursed vessel haunted by spirits. Some crew members had reportedly complained of strange noises, knocking from within the hull, voices calling from empty corridors in the days before the disappearance. Skeptics dismiss these tales as superstition, but maritime historians note an eerie pattern. This previous owner had also vanished without a trace years earlier, his fate as unresolved as the ship. The official inquiry settled on a mundane explanation: misadventure at sea, a bureaucratic shrug that explained nothing. Modern theorists have tried to fill the gaps. Could the crew have been attacked by pirates, though nothing of value was stolen? Did they fall victim to carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty engine, their confused minds leading them to leap overboard? The most chilling possibility is that they're still out there, not as bodies, but as missing persons. In the 1960s, a European trader in the Solomon Islands swore he'd met a man claiming to be a survivor, but the lead evaporated before it could be pursued. What lingers isn't just the mystery, but the way that defies every rule of maritime logic. Ships don't vanish in calm seas. Crews don't disappear without leaving a trail. Yet the Pacific, vast and indifferent, seems to have folded the story into its depths, offering only fragments: a bloodied scalpel, a broken radio, an empty deck, as clues to a puzzle we may never solve. The ocean keeps its secrets well, and this crew remains forever suspended between the known and the unknowable. A reminder that even in our age of satellites and sonar, some stories slip through the net. The man's body lay sprawled on Adelaide's beach, as still as the December dawn around him. Well dressed in a suit and tie, with polished shoes and no signs of struggle, he looked almost peaceful, except for the chilling detail clenched in his pocket. A scrap of paper torn from a rare Persian poetry book bore 2 words, meaning ended or finished. This wasn't just a death, it was a riddle wrapped in a code, a mystery that would baffle investigators for decades. The autopsy deepened the enigma. The man, estimated to be in his 40s, had no identification, and his labels had been meticulously snipped from his clothing. His spleen was grotesquely enlarged, his blood vessels flooded as if poisoned, yet no known toxin could be found. Even his fingerprints matched no records across the globe, as if he'd never existed. Then came the book itself, discovered weeks later in the backseat of an unlocked car nearby. Inside, scrawled in faint pencil, was a cipher, a series of seemingly random letters that decryption by top codebreakers, including military intelligence. Was this the work of a spy, a suicide note, or something far stranger? Theories spiral like the cryptic letters themselves. Some point to Cold War intrigue. The Soviet Union had operatives in Australia at the time, and the poetry book's author was wildly popular among Soviet intellectuals. Others fixate on the man's possible connection to a local nurse, who allegedly owned a copy of the same book and whose number was found unlisted in his possession. When shown his death mask, she reacted with visible shock, yet claimed not to recognize him. Then there's the eerie detail of his unusually muscular calves and deformed toes, traits common among ballet dancers, or people who'd spent years wearing custom-made shoes like spies. But the most haunting question isn't who he was, it's why his story refuses to end. In 2022, DNA testing finally gave him a name: Carl Charles, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. Yet this breakthrough only birthed new mysteries. Why was a bookish man with no known ties to espionage found dead with an unbreakable code? Why did his wife report him missing months after his death? And why, after all these years, does the scrap still feel less like a clue and more like a taunt? The man's case lingers because it's more than a cold file. It's a mirror held up to our obsession with unsolved stories. We crave closure, yet some truths slip through our fingers like sand. His face, frozen in that plastered death mask, seems to whisper what the code never will: that in the end, some mysteries outlive even the people they haunt. The Arctic wind howls differently over the vast, frozen stretches of northern Canada, a sound so piercing it feels like a warning. In November 1910, Inspector Francis and 3 other Royal Northwest Mounted Police officers set out from Fort on what should have been a routine mission, tracking down a fugitive named Albert Johnson, accused of stealing traps from local Inuit hunters. The journey to Dawson City, though brutal in winter, was a path they'd navigated before. But this time, the Arctic had other plans. Weeks passed with no word from the patrol. When search parties finally retraced their route, they found a trail of grim clues, abandoned sleds, frozen campsites, and eventually the bodies of 3 officers. Only Johnson, the man they'd been sent to apprehend, was never found. His disappearance, along with the missing officer, would become one of the Arctic's most chilling enigmas. What makes this tragedy so haunting isn't just the loss of life, but the way the land itself seems to have conspired against them. The search party discovered diary, its final entries scrawled in shaky handwriting as frostbite and starvation took hold. "All hands nearly dead," one page read. "No hope. The officers had underestimated the cold, their supplies dwindling as temperatures plummeted to 60 below zero." Some speculate they took a wrong turn, their maps rendered useless in the featureless white expanse. Others believe they were caught in a blizzard so fierce it erased all landmarks, leaving them to wander in circles until the cold claimed them. But the absence of Johnson's body raises darker questions. Did he outlast them, surviving long enough to vanish into the wilderness? Or did the patrol, desperate and delirious, turn on one another in their final hours? Then there are the whispers from the local Inuit communities. Some elders spoke of a lone white man seen years later, living among the caribou herds, his face weathered beyond recognition. Could this have been Johnson, the fugitive who somehow cheated death? The Arctic is merciless, but it also guards its secrets fiercely. Frozen ground preserves as much as it destroys, and yet no trace of Johnson or the missing officer has ever surfaced. The official report blamed the elements, but the unsolved nature of the case lingers like the endless twilight of an Arctic winter. The Lost Patrol's fate serves as a grim reminder of the North's indifference. Even today, with modern gear and satellites, the Arctic remains a place where people can vanish without a trace. The Mounties' story isn't just about a failed mission. It's about the thin line between order and chaos, the illusion of control in a land that refuses to be tamed. Their names are etched on a lonely wooden cross near Fort, a monument to the countless souls the ice has swallowed. And somewhere beneath the snowdrifts or the northern lights, the truth still waits, silent, frozen, and forever out of reach. The towering stones of Stonehenge stand as a silent testament to a people who mastered the impossible, hauling rocks weighing up to 50 tons across miles of rugged terrain, fitting them together with precision that defies the era's technology. Yet for all their ingenuity, the builders left behind no names, no records, not even a whisper of their fate. Archaeologists estimate the monument took over 1,500 years to complete, with generations laboring under the same unbroken vision. Then, around 1600 BC, the work abruptly stopped. The tools were dropped, the quarries abandoned, and the people who'd moved mountains of stone simply walked away, leaving their masterpiece to the wind. What could make an entire culture vanish without a trace? One theory points to climate. Pollen samples from the period reveal a dramatic shift, lush grasslands giving way to acidic peat bogs, making farming nearly impossible. The once fertile plains around Stonehenge may have turned barren, forcing the builders to migrate in search of survival. Others argue it was invasion. Around the same time, a wave of newcomers known as the Beaker people arrived from continental Europe, bringing bronze weapons and unfamiliar customs. Did they conquer the native builders, or did the two groups merge, their identities blending until the original architects were forgotten? Then there's the enigma of Stonehenge itself. The site's alignment with solstices suggests a deep connection to the heavens, but recent discoveries of human remains, some bearing violent injuries, hint at darker rituals. Were the builders driven out by revolt, their sacred site becoming a symbol of oppression? Or did their beliefs evolve, rendering the stones obsolete? The answer might lie in the smaller, overlooked monuments nearby. Places like Walls, a massive settlement just 2 miles from Stonehenge, show signs of sudden abandonment. Half-eaten meals left on floors, tools scattered as if dropped mid-task. It's as if the people fled in haste, turning their backs on centuries of tradition. The most haunting possibility is that they never truly left. Genetic studies of modern Britons reveal traces of the same DNA found in Neolithic bones near Stonehenge. Perhaps the builders didn't disappear, they became us, their bloodlines enduring even as their language and legacy faded into myth. The stones, then, aren't just a puzzle from the past, they're a mirror. They force us to ask, what monuments of ours will stand 1,000 years from now, and who will gaze at them just as baffled as we are today, wondering where we went the hanging gardens of Babylon dangle in history's imagination. A lush, tiered paradise rising above the desert, its vines cascading like waterfalls over stone terraces. Ancient writers gushed over its marvels, irrigation systems pumping water from the Euphrates to nourish exotic plants, a royal gift from King Nebuchadnezzar to his homesick Median queen. Yet here's the twist, centuries of excavations in Iraq have turned up not a single brick, inscription, or seed that definitively proves the gardens existed. Were they purely a traveler's tall tale, or is one of the 7 wonders still waiting to be unearthed beneath the dust of? The case for the gardens' existence hinges on vivid accounts from Greek and Roman historians like Strabo, and who described them in meticulous detail centuries after Babylon's peak. But not one Babylonian source, no court records, no royal decrees, not even a passing mention on a clay tablet, breathes a word about this botanical masterpiece. Even Herodotus, the father of history, who devoted pages to Babylon's walls and ziggurats, mysteriously omitted the gardens entirely. Could later writers have conflated stories from other cities? Some scholars point to Nineveh, where Assyrian King Sennacherib boasted of an elaborate garden watered by an ingenious system of canals and screws, a description eerily similar to the legendary Hanging Gardens. Then there's the engineering puzzle. Babylon's arid climate and flat terrain make the gardens' survival seem impossible without divine intervention. Ancient texts claim the structure soared over 75 feet high, its roots anchored not in earth but in stone columns and terraces, a feat requiring technology far ahead of its time. Yet recent excavations by Oxford's suggest a tantalizing possibility. Her research proposes that the gardens were actually built in Nineveh, their fame later transplanted to Babylon through centuries of oral tradition. Among the evidence, a bas-relief from Sennacherib's palace depicting a sprawling garden irrigated by an Archimedes-like screw predating Nebuchadnezzar by decades. But if the gardens did exist in Babylon, why has no trace survived? The city's ruins have been picked over for centuries, its famed Ishtar Gate painstakingly reconstructed. One theory blames the Euphrates itself. Its shifting course may have swallowed the garden's remains, burying them under layers of silt. Others speculate that the structure, built largely of perishable and wood, simply crumbled into oblivion, leaving no distinctive footprint. Even the garden's proposed location, near Nebuchadnezzar's palace, has yielded nothing more exciting than storage rooms and administrative archives. The mystery endures because it challenges our very definition of wonder. Unlike the pyramids or the Colossus of Rhodes, the Hanging Gardens leave no corpse to examine, just whispers on crumbling parchment. Perhaps their greatest magic was their ephemeral nature, a fleeting dream of greenery in the desert, so magnificent that even its absence feels like a monument. Or maybe beneath some Iraqi farmer's field, the gears of an ancient aqueduct still wait to be turned, ready to bring the legend back to life. Until then, the gardens remain suspended between history and myth, proof that some wonders aren't lost, they're just hiding in plain sight. The scorching sands of China's desert hold secrets that defy expectations. Perfectly preserved mummies with striking European features, their flaxen hair still vibrant, their woolen garments intricately woven, their faces frozen in time for over 4,000 years. These aren't the relics of a passing trade caravan. They're the remains of an entire forgotten culture, one that thrived in the heart of Asia before the Silk Road's golden age. The most famous among them, the so-called Beauty of, lies with her high cheekbones and auburn hair still coiled in braids, her hands resting gently as if she'd simply closed her eyes for a nap and never woke up. But how did people with such distinctly Caucasian features come to rest in what's now Western China? And why did their vibrant society vanish without leaving a trace in the historical record? Theories about their origins read like a puzzle missing half its pieces. Some scholars point to the Tocharian tribes, an ancient Indo-European people whose language fragments were discovered in the same region. Linguistic evidence suggests they migrated eastward from the steppes of Ukraine or southern Russia, following rivers and grazing lands until they reached the Tarim Basin. Others argue these mummies might be linked to the Mysterious, a nomadic group driven west by the ancestors of Attila the Hun. But what's undeniable is their sophistication. The mummies were buried with finely crafted textiles, including tartan patterns eerily similar to those found in Celtic Europe, and traces of ephedra, a plant used in rituals across Eurasia. This wasn't some isolated outpost. It was a crossroads of cultures, a place where East and West mingled long before history books took notice. Their disappearance is even more baffling than their arrival. Around 1500 BC, the graves stopped. No war, no invasion, no clear ecological disaster explains their absence. One prevailing theory blames climate change. The Tarim Basin, once laced with rivers and grasslands, slowly transformed into the merciless desert we know today. As the waters vanished, so too did the land's ability to sustain their farms and flocks. Others speculate that newcomers, perhaps the ancestors of modern Uyghurs, absorbed or displaced them, their bloodlines blending until their distinct identity dissolved. But the most haunting possibility is that they simply walked away, their story erased by the very sands that preserved their bodies. Modern politics have clouded the mystery further. The Chinese government, wary of separatist movements in Xinjiang, has downplayed the mummies' European roots, sometimes restricting access to researchers. Meanwhile, nationalist groups in the West have co-opted them as proof of ancient Caucasian dominance, twisting archaeology into propaganda. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. These people weren't outsiders, they were pioneers, a thread in the vast tapestry of human migration. Their perfectly preserved faces remind us that history isn't a straight line, but a web of forgotten connections, waiting beneath the dunes for the next gust of wind to reveal them. The great stone cities of the Maya stand empty, monuments to a civilization that walked away from its own masterpiece. At its peak, the Maya world was a dazzling network of over 40 city-states, their pyramids piercing the jungle canopy, their astronomers tracking celestial cycles with jaw-dropping precision. Then between the 8th and 9th centuries, something shifted. The meticulously carved stele, stone calendars marking kings' reigns stopped being updated. The grand plazas, once bustling with merchants, and fell silent. By 900 AD, places like Tikal and were left to the vines and howler monkeys, their doorways gaping like unanswered questions. What could make a society abandon its beating heart? Climate scientists point to a devastating, revealed in lakebed sediments, a dry spell so severe it stretched for decades, withering crops and draining reservoirs. Tree rings from the period tell a story of back-to-back failed rainy seasons, a death sentence for cities dependent on maize. But drought alone doesn't explain why some cities collapsed while others, like in the north, thrived for centuries longer. Then there's the war theory. Deciphered glyphs describe a world unraveling, alliances shattered, dynasties toppled in bloodshed. At Duz, archaeologists found evidence of a royal family massacred, their bones tossed down temple steps. Some scholars believe warfare became endemic, a feedback loop of resource scarcity and violence. Yet this doesn't account for cities abandoned peacefully, their valuables still in place, as if everyone simply agreed to leave. The most haunting clues come from the Maya themselves. Their books, though mostly burned by Spanish priests, speak of cyclical time, eras ending not in apocalypse but transformation. Perhaps the collapse wasn't a failure but a deliberate retreat. Farmers may have returned to scattered villages, trading grandeur for resilience. Today, millions of Maya still live across Central America, their language is vibrant, their traditions adapting. The truth might lie not in a single catastrophe, but in 1,000 small choices. A civilization stepping back from stone to survive in flesh and blood. Standing in the ruins of Tikal at sunset, as shadows swallow the temple of the great jaguar, you can almost hear the echo of their parting wisdom. That a culture's strength isn't measured in the height of its pyramids, but in the persistence of its people. The cities fell, but the Maya never truly vanished. They just turned the page. From swallowed armies to ghost ships, these 32 disappearances remind us how fragile history's threads can be, woven tight one moment, unraveling the next without warning. Think of the Ninth Legion marching into mist, or the Mary drifting silently with its table still set for breakfast. These aren't just footnotes, they're gaping holes in the tapestry of time, places where the needle lifted and the story simply stopped. And yet it's the very incompleteness of these mysteries that keeps us coming back, like detectives sifting through the ashes of a cold case, hoping for one overlooked clue. What's fascinating isn't just the vanishings themselves, but what they reveal about us. The human mind recoils at silence, will invent pirates, curses, even aliens to explain the unexplainable. Take the Pass incident. A slab avalanche might fit the facts, but it can't quiet the whispers of government conspiracies or Yeti attacks. We crave narratives, even when the truth is messier, quieter, or just plain lost. And sometimes, the lack of answers becomes its own kind of answer. A humbling reminder that for all our satellites and algorithms, the past guards its secrets fiercely. But here's the thing, history isn't static. Every few years, a new scrap of evidence surfaces. A sunken ship spotted by sonar, a DNA match pulling a John Doe from obscurity, a diary page fluttering loose from an attic box. The Roanoke colonists might yet speak through buried pottery shards. The Beaumont children's faces could still emerge from a faded photograph held by a stranger. The thrill of these cases isn't just in their darkness, but in their possibility. They're reminders that the past isn't dead. It's just waiting for the right sleuth, the right technology, the right moment. So what's your theory? Do you think the children were stolen, or did they vanish into new lives? Could this lost city still lie beneath the dunes, or was it always a mirage? The comments are open and the conversation is half the fun. After all, every great mystery thrives on collective curiosity, the shared itch to dig deeper, to question louder, to refuse the easy silence. If these stories gripped you as much as they gripped us, hit subscribe and join us for the next deep dive into history's shadowy corners. Until then, keep looking closer, because sometimes the most haunting question is what happened it? What if we're wrong about everything we think?